What's going on, guys? Out of the Park Pod here with John Rondi. Super excited to get this one out for you guys. Um, this is really cool for me. I've been following him for about 2 years, so this is pretty cool. If you just want to introduce yourself,
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate you
no problem.
supporting the brand and watching for a couple of years now. My name is John Rondi. My dad and I are better known as Johnny Drinks, the father and son cocktail duo on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you get your social media fix from. And yeah, basically we started the brand about 4.5 years ago when we had nothing else to do in quarantine, like everybody else. We started making cocktails, and I guess we were different in that we started filming it, and it ended up doing pretty well for us in the beginning. Our first video went quote unquote viral, and we said to ourselves, why not keep trying this out? And it ended up working out pretty well. And 4.5 years later, here we are with a little over 5 million followers across the board, doing things like cocktail making, but we're also deep diving into uh, dad advice content, travel content, food content. We've done in-person stuff with some pretty big name people. So we're at the end of the day just having some fun and hopefully inspiring and helping some younger generation guys out.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen your videos all over multiple times, multiple platforms, and I mean they're great. So I guess the first question I have is kind of a basic question. What's your favorite drink?
Well, I have an espresso martini tattooed on me, so I have to go with an espresso martini. If it depends on the setting, man, like where I'm at and the time of the day and who I'm with. I love cocktail bars, so when I was young, like 22, fresh out of college, I didn't even know what a real cocktail was. I was drinking vodka clubs or whatever was cheapest at the bar. And so now I love to experience different things. So if I'm at a really nice establishment, I'm always looking at the specialty cocktail menu. I want to let their bartenders do their thing, and I'm always down to try something. But if not, yeah, I'm getting a Negroni normally before food, and then an espresso martini or two after.
Wow.
Awesome, man. I look, I'm only 20. We're both only 20,
Hmm.
so we got a long ways to go
You're
there
not
yet.
drink-
But
you're not drinking yet, exactly.
yeah, but my first question was, how did you kind of get into social media? Obviously, the quarantine thing you touched on, but was there like a defining moment that you're like, yes, this is what I want to do?
Yeah, man. So I prior to this, I had a tech startup out of college that I was running, and like anybody else that started their own business, you realize very quickly that it's a lot harder than you thought, and you get very humbled. So I had to reach out to a ton of creators and meme pages and reach out and ask what your rate is to promote my business and my app. And when they started saying numbers like at that point it was like $500 or $1,000, I'm like, you can make $1,000 by posting somebody else's content. So that always intrigued me, like how is that even a business? But then it made a lot more sense to me when I started making my own content. And so from the early on, as soon as we started going viral and gaining a following, I was like, this is what I want to do. It was very easy for me to understand, like, hey, I know relatively what I need to be doing, and if I just stick to it, we can grow a page pretty big, and there's always going to be money to be made doing it. So yeah, I've always had, like, I guess, an intriguement about it, and it wasn't until I started making content that you realize, okay, it can get pretty serious.
Yeah, no, that's super similar to us. Like we started, it was just so hard to like get the consistency for us. I mean, just reaching out, constantly making content has been the best part, but there's so much that goes into actually making other videos that a lot of people don't know, like the editing and just finding different platforms to post on and like what's trending at the time and just like sticking to your morals ultimately. I mean, luckily we've found like the perfect like setup for us that works for us with this podcast, but it's definitely been an experience for us as well. So kind of you obviously work with your dad. What's that been like? Has it like grown you guys together a lot? Is it like what is it like?
It's hard to answer that, man, because you never know what the alternative would be, right? Because it didn't
Hmm.
happen. So, like, hypothetically, let's say I didn't work with my dad and I was at some sort of finance gig in the city and I never really was home that often. My relationship, I don't know, would be better or worse. It'd be different. I definitely wouldn't see him as much, but you realize very quickly working with a family member has its goods and has its bads. We're constantly at each other's necks, but at the same time, 5 minutes later, we got to eat dinner together. So we've, I think, done a really good job with separating the two. We don't need a whole day's worth of like ignoring one another to get past an argument, let's say. So if we're filming, we got to get something done, we get it done. But once filming is over, we put everything by the wayside and we're family again. So I would say the biggest struggle for me internally is like dealing with this father figure of yours, but now having to talk to him like a business partner or even an employee sometimes, and telling your dad that he's doing something wrong, it's very hard. And so we're very type A. We're pretty similar in that sense. So we definitely, get into our arguments, but at the end of the day, I wouldn't want to deal with anybody else.
That's awesome, man. It's cool to see like it's so weird because everybody has a different like relationship with their family when coming on to like the social media scene. Like sometimes you see that's their whole thing, like their whole page is about their family, and sometimes you don't even know who their family is. So it's cool to see that difference out there, and it's good to know that you and your father are closer than some people might think. Like some people might think it's all for show.
Yeah. I
It's
mean, listen,
really
it
it's
would be,
really cool.
what I mean? It would be very hard to have it all for show because look, we
Hmm.
can put on a happy face if we're having a bad day or whatever, make a 30-second TikTok, but to do it over and over again, and you guys as creatives know it's very hard to create and become creative when you're in this place of stress and anger and negativity. You have to be in a positive mindset. You can only, everybody always talks about operating off of fear, and I do think fear pushes you a lot harder than, say, like happiness and excitement sometimes. But it's very hard when you're stacking losses to keep positive and keep making content. You got to have some wins once in a while. So for us, a win isn't necessarily going viral at this point. It's more so having a really good shoot day, and being happy with one another and being on the same page creatively. Like that's a win for me. The rest of it is what it is. I can't control how many views we get. I have an understanding of what I think is going to do really well on social, but I kind of post and put my phone away. I can't afford to play this game of constantly watching what is working and what isn't. You'll drive yourself crazy. I mean, I used to do it, and now I'm like, okay, if I want to keep this rolling, it's way more about consistency and just posting than worrying about going viral every time I post.
That's how it is with us. We see like one of our pods will get like I don't know a couple views and a couple views less than the other one. And like, what do we do right? What do we do wrong? When in reality, man, that's the game. We're always talking with each other and just saying, hey, let's just keep consistent. The worst that we can do is, people just felt like we just got to find that right thing. I don't know what that thing is yet, but we're excited to find out. And I see that you have a podcast as well, and it's called On the Rocks. Am I right?
I'm in the
There
studio
it
right
is
now.
in the
Yeah, with
studio
Wow.
now, man. That's awesome.
yeah, man. I mean, the podcast stuff is so hard, dude. Like, it's so hard to grow a fan base and a loyal following. Everyone has a podcast, but it's different. It's easy to get somebody to watch a 30-second video, right? You go viral one time, it's pretty cool. But getting somebody to watch, say, an hour, 2 hour podcast, you got to be really interesting or really entertaining or whatever it may be, right? And you see what goes viral nowadays is like the crazy vulgar nonsense, right? If you're a girl and you got your tits out, you're talking about sex. Like that's an easy one. And I'm not like dismissing those sort of people and those sort of podcasts, but you don't want to be you don't want to go down that hole and then look back and be like, that's all I was sort of good for was to be raunchy and get clicks. Like that's not building a brand. So building an authentic brand and providing value to your audience, I think that's the hardest part is figuring out number one who your audience is and like what value you want to provide.
Yeah, no, that's definitely like a big thing is just figuring out that the audience type. I mean, I know we kind of hit on a lot of different audiences just because we do so many different guests from different backgrounds, and I think that's what makes us more unique than some other people because they kind of stick to like the same thing. Now it's a advantage and a disadvantage for us because yeah, we're spread across multiple different audiences, multiple different people listening, everything like that. But for me, I enjoy just being able to talk to people from different backgrounds and different like what they do on their day-to-day life is different instead of just kind of sticking to like one specific group like when you read our podcast name Out of the Park, it's like we get a lot of people asking, oh, is it just a baseball podcast or like what is it specifically, when in reality, yeah, the name was more, it sounds more baseball than we actually talk about because I think we might have talked about baseball maybe once. So it's like you get that with our name, but it's so much more than that, and I just love meeting new people every single day that we do this. um
That's good.
so
Yeah,
yeah.
you guys are young too. Like, you know what I mean? It's at the end of the day, you guys are, I'm assuming, good friends. You wouldn't do this
Mhm.
with a fucking stranger or somebody you didn't like. So like if you're riffing with one another and having a partner and a co-host is great because like you don't have to have a guest on. If you guys want to talk about latest news or whatever the fuck it is, you can. And then a guest is like a cherry on top. And so all you're doing right now is stacking these like I guess lessons and great conversations think about the people that you'll have in like the quote unquote room with you. And for this sense, it's like the Zoom room or whatever. You're not having a conversation with those people if you didn't have this podcast, right? So for nothing else, at least you could say you were able to do that, and then you never know what opportunity comes from stuff like that. So yeah, it's a fun experience, and I think you guys are doing a good job with it.
Yeah, thank you. No, I appreciate that. It's definitely been, it's not what we'd like to do. Like, we'd like to be in person with our guests and everything like that. But under the circumstances, like you said, we're still young. I'm in college. He's at home doing his stuff. So it's like, this was like the crossing grounds and everything that we were able to be able to film online and everything. But ideally, it would be great to have our guest in person, just because I feel like you can build that better connection with them if you're actually face to face. And it seems like so much nowadays is people are all about their phones and all about talking on their phones when they can't really have a conversation with someone in person. And I think that's just where like our generation struggles, is like just not being able to actually hold a conversation or make a conversation with, whether it's random people or even their friends. Like, it just seems like so many people just struggle in that aspect of life.
Yeah, man. And it's funny. I was talking to, so you say your generation, and I'm like, you're fucking 9 years younger than me, which is insane. So you really are a generation below. And I was talking to a teacher, a college professor, and like the reality is, yeah, like a 21-year-old is already still young, but now you got to take a step back and really subtract like 2 or 3 years from their age because of COVID, right? So you're dealing societally or mentally with like an 18, 19-year-old that really doesn't know how to communicate in person. And they lost those years. And then you double that down with how much technology has taken over. It's a struggle, man. And it's hard even for my generation to learn these skills, but also to not get caught up. I mean, the dopamine hits that you're receiving from these phones and social media, it's draining. And you don't realize why this generation or your generation is so much, your energy is drained. Everyone calls you guys lazy or us lazy. I don't think it's laziness. I think you're just tapped out. Like, you have so much to think about on a day-to-day basis and no real reward for it because you're not thinking about things necessarily that are helping you. You're consuming so much information on a given day. By the time you're about to go to bed, you're like, I'm shot, dude. I can't fucking think straight.
Yeah, it is crazy how social media has taken over. There's some pros and cons though. Like obviously, like giving us a platform and stuff. Like I
Oh,
love social media just because of that. I get to be myself on here, and ever since I was young, I've always wanted to start something. I didn't know what. I didn't know if it was a podcast. I didn't know if it was. Obviously, we want to get into some like IRL content as well. So we want to start doing some more things. But I love social media, but it does have its cons. Where, as you said, the dopamine. It's just I mean, all day, I'm on my phone. I got to be honest. I think everybody is nowadays. And I'm looking at information that I probably like 10 years ago, if I was like younger, I probably wouldn't have known. Like I'm looking at stuff that I don't need to know. And sometimes it's just, I mean, there's pros and cons. I mean, it's like that everywhere in life, but this is like different. I don't know how to explain it.
yeah, man. It's the best advice I got because look, the reality is, especially us, like we do this for a living, quote unquote. You're not gonna stop, looking at your phone, right? That's just not gonna happen. So what I think the best thing you can do is really physically filter out the content you're seeing, right? You know how the algorithm works. The more attention you give something, the more the algorithm's going to feed you. So if your feed is a bunch of girls shaking their ass, well, guess what? It's because you're engaged with that content. So
Mm.
maybe try to force yourself to engage with content that you know is good for you. And maybe you don't necessarily enjoy it as much, right? Because it's not as stimulating, but it is going to be good for you in the long run. So it's maybe content about learning a new skill or somebody that's doing something that you do just at a better level, or maybe it's about your faith or whatever it may be that's bettering yourself. I think if you take the time just to make sure you filter out and create your own feed, you'll be in a way better spot than say letting the algorithm do the work for you.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree for that. So kind of outside of like the content that you make and stuff, what else do you like to do?
It's a good question, man. I mean, it is consuming, so like to not say that I don't, that's all I do. I train jiu-jitsu a lot. I go to the gym a lot. I'm in a very I guess, abundant area, let's say. There's bars everywhere, so there's always something to do. I live in Jersey City, and I am across from Hoboken, which Hoboken has the most bars per square mile than like any place in America. So there is a lot to do around here. So if you guys haven't been here, I definitely recommend taking a little field trip up. But yeah, man, I love, I love establishing and building new relationships with people that maybe I didn't grow up with. And now, because of what we do, it has afforded me to meet people that I would have never met and getting in the room with these people and just like picking their brain. I love having stimulating conversations. So, podcast, yeah, it's like quote unquote work. But to be able to sit down for 2 hours and not look at my phone and forget about the world for a little bit, I love that stuff, man. I love feeling like I learned something new that day. I love feeling stimulated, that like heightened sense of wow, we're both on the same page right now and we're learning from one another. But at the end of the day, like you do have to become obsessed with whatever you're doing. So for me to be like, yeah, I want to have this work-life balance. Number one, my work isn't, with a sledgehammer on the streets. Like this isn't necessarily work that's hard labor-wise. So I don't want to make that excuse and be like, I need a balance. I want to be obsessed. I want to be able to be the best that I can be. And I know my dad and I have a pretty cool niche, and we'd be doing ourselves a disservice if we didn't take advantage of that and give it our all. So I love having attention on the brand at all times. So whether I'm making content physically, or I'm thinking about content, or I'm talking to people about making content, or I'm doing different things in person, I want to be all about it 24/7.
Yeah, I'm the same way with like this pod. Like, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of days I go by and I'm like, yo, I'm thinking about this pod way too. Like sometimes I think about it too much. I'm like, man, I want to get the next step, the next guest, and I also want to like schedule some things. And I'm always just thinking about it. So I know exactly where you're coming from. I mean, it's a good thing to be honest. Like I love what I do, and I love just making videos. And like I said, ever since I was a kid, I've always kind of wanted to do that. So, but if you, I don't know if you, I didn't even look, but if you don't have a drink, I don't know if you have your own drink or seltzer or anything out. Do you have that out at all?
So that's a good question, man. We've done, and I'll give you like a little behind the scenes
Okay.
afterwards. We've done three different limited time offers with whiskey brands, right? So in other words, it's not our brand. It's basically,
Okay.
hey, we have this batch of bourbon. We're gonna slap your label on it, and then you're gonna sell it as if it is yours. And so obviously went through the process to be like, okay, we like this blend, and we took the time to make sure that it resonates with our audience as far as like the marketing goes. So we've done that three different times with three different distilleries, and it's worked out really well every single time. Like we sold out. We did a really expensive run one time. It was like a $300 bottle, but we made sure the presentation was there. It was a very old or aged bourbon, which is highly sought after. We did like kind of like a I guess a pre-order, so to speak. We sold this bourbon out overnight, and for me, that was I mean, scary is a tough word, but that was like the scariest moment as far as the brand goes. Like we have a lot riding on this one, and you start to play this game with yourself. Like, okay, when we go live, I'll be happy if we sell one or two bottles, right? Because you have to let your expectations kind of drop a little bit lower, because if they're too high and then you get crushed, you're like, what the fuck do I do now? So you do have to sort of protect yourself and be like, okay, worst case scenario, we sell one or two bottles, but then we're going to work really hard to keep selling these things. And we sold out overnight, and we had a queue of like 2,000 people trying to buy these bottles, and we only had 140 of them. So really good problem to have. That was for me like the holy shit moment. We can sell something. And then the third batch was with a smaller distillery out in Jersey. Really really fun. Had a lot of, I guess, learning, a big learning experience for us. You know what I mean? Like we learned how to sell, we learned who to work with, who not to work with, how to work with them again. But the biggest takeaway for me is that everything you do as like a content creator, there's going to be an opportunity cost, right? So you can look at it on the surface and be like, okay, we made this much money with this bourbon, but how much time do we spend doing that? And how many brands now won't work with us because we have our own bourbon? So you now just told every other bourbon and whiskey brand, hey, you can't work with Johnny Drinks anymore because they have their own thing going on. So for us, it's like, is that risk worth the reward? And sometimes it definitely is, and other times it's not. And right now, transparently, it's not. We're building our own brand, so that's a separate business. So for us to now have to start a business from the ground up, there's way too much money to be made working with already established brands that can help us grow and we can help them grow, than to try to do something on our own. So not to say that's not going to happen in the future. It's just we're sort of waiting for the right people.
That would be pretty cool, man.
Yeah.
I just seen like a whole bunch of different people, like even people that aren't associated with alcohol or anything, just making their own stuff. So I think it would be pretty sweet to see you do your own thing. But obviously, it would have to all come together, you know?
That makes sense, dude. And that's what I don't know, man. I'm not talking shit about anybody. I see some people that like are celebrities or creators, and I'm like, the fuck are you starting a brand like that for? Like, you don't even drink or you don't even do those different things. Like, how are you selling that in your regular life and in most of your content? If it doesn't align with you as a brand, maybe it aligns with you as a person. Like, let's say, I don't know, a boxer is like, I love whiskey. I'm gonna start a whiskey brand. Okay, when are you ever going to be able to really promote that brand? And I get it. There's the anomalies of like the McGregors of the world that are able to do it really really well. Other than that, man, like the proof is in the pudding. Normally, it doesn't fucking work out. So you should probably do what works best. If you're a fighter, why would you not put your name on something fight related? You know, if it's a recovery drink or if it's gloves or whatever it may be, that makes way more sense than just slapping your name on a label because so and so did it before.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Kind of, I 100% agree with that. Just because you do see people. I mean, obviously, a lot of people do consume alcohol and everything like that. Like the big person that I think about that comes to like creators and alcohol is the Nelk Boys. Like they've from a young age, whether they were underage or not, like they started really early doing that. So it kind of just made sense for them to come out with their own brands such as Happy Dad. Like they came out with it, and I mean, it's perfect for them. It fits them. But I do also see where you're coming from. Where there are a lot of creators and influencers that are just going around and they get into this just because they see it's popular. And
Yeah.
whether it works or not, I guess it's all about the numbers to them, but it doesn't really fit what they actually stand for.
Yeah, man, and so that's a really good example, right? Like Kyle and all them, the Nelk boys, they're incredible as far as like not only making content but as businessmen. They've been doing it for so long that they just understand their audience. But you also have to keep in mind like they have a mastermind team behind Happy Dad. It's not just them. They didn't just say, "Hey, we're going to start selling a seltzer." They have a team of people. John Shahidi and Sam Shahidi being two of them. They're like the main guys that have founded Happy Dad with the Nelk boys, and they're crushing it because they have a team of people doing it. If the Nelk Boys, the three of them themselves, tried to do this alone, it'd be almost impossible to do both, right? Make content and keep that brand going with everything else they have going, and then grow Happy Dad to where it is today. So they're the perfect example of like guys that are on they're the face of the brand. They're doing a phenomenal job, but they have the people behind the scenes that are also doing a phenomenal job.
Yeah, no, I mean it's just great to see how like everyone can get their audience and just be able to find that one thing that works for them. So,
Yeah.
what if you could have a drink with anyone, whether they're like way back or anyone, who would it be?
I mean, yeah, I mean Dana White was definitely one of them, and then getting to do that was pretty spectacular. It was like one of those like pinch me moments, you know, like wow, we're really doing this shit. So him and the UFC have been great for us. Matthew McConaughey comes to my mind. I think I'd like to just sit down and have a conversation with him. He seems like such an interesting and intriguing guy. Leonardo DiCaprio would be phenomenal. I like people that have really cool stories, but just seem so much different than everybody else that it wouldn't just be like this high level conversation. The Rock would be really cool, but also he seems a little performative. You know what I mean? Like you don't know what you're gonna get out of him. You may get a 5 minute like, hey, high level, making sure he saves face conversation, but I think with these other guys, they may get really real with you. And that would be the intention of a conversation like that. I don't know, man. There's definitely people that have always inspired me that I want to see the real side of them. And I think that's like the beauty. And I know there's a lot of stigma behind drinking alcohol, but that is really what it does, right? It breaks down the walls of awkward conversation and you can get real with somebody really quick. And it doesn't have to take getting drunk. Maybe it's a couple, two or three drinks, and now you're really talking about things that you never thought you would be.
Yeah, man. I take it that you are a big UFC fan, though, as obviously you said, having a drink with Dana White. I am a big UFC fan myself. This is kind of a question I kind of just thought of, but what is your favorite weight class and who is your favorite fighter?
Man, it's hard. I mean, listen, the reality is you go back to like gladiator times, right? Like you want to
Mhm.
see the biggest and baddest, right? So when John Jones fights light, heavy, or he fights heavy, like that's you want to see the fucking dudes going at it, the 6'4" monsters. But I love Volkanovski. You know, I've loved watching these. I come from a wrestling background. I train jiu-jitsu, so I love watching wrestlers and grapplers go at it. So watching Sean O'Malley, um, get out wrestled. A lot of guys would watch that fight and be like, that was a boring fight, and Sean had his opportunities. I mean, that was incredible, right? A pure dominance fight is great to watch, and I don't think you get that skill at the higher weights just because they're not as fast, they're not as technical. So wrestlers like Islam are just so much fun to watch, or Khabib back in the day. People would think that may be boring, but if you're super skilled in one aspect of the fight and you dominate, kind of just goes to show which martial art reigns supreme. And you're seeing it right now. I mean, without Alex Pereira dominating with his kickboxing, everybody else seems to be a wrestler, because at the end of the day, if you don't knock somebody out, the fight normally ends on the ground. And if you don't know what you're doing on the ground, you might get beat up. So yeah, I'm pretty like weight class agnostic. I don't really care what weight they are. I just love seeing a complete mixed martial art fight with every martial art being used.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I used to hate wrestling. I used to be like, yo, knock him out like this.
Yeah,
Then
of course.
I found like a new love for the UFC.
Go watch boxing. I mean, if you want to watch people
Yeah,
knock each other out, go watch a boxing match. I mean,
exactly. Yeah. I used to be a boxing guy, and then my friend was like, "Yo, come!" It was my first ever fight was McGregor Poirier 2, so the one that Poirier won when he knocked him out. And after that, I was like, "Man, this is kind of cool." Kind of was like tuned into it, but then now I'm like super heavy into it. I'm watching all the fight nights. I'm watching all the events. My favorite fighter is Aspinall right now.
yeah,
I love him. I think I just want to see him fight Jones. I like Jones. I think Jones is the GOAT, but I would love to see that fight. I mean, it's just a super fight. I think Aspinall could win. You never know. I mean, I just think it would be awesome. But that fight excites me, and I love Volkanovski. I love Poirier. I love Sugar Sean. But yeah, I found a new love for technical submissions and just like technical wrestling. Like I just found a whole new love for it. I hated it in the game. I'm like, why is this guy taking him down? Now I love it. It's like amazing.
it's just a different, like you have to see it from a different lens. You understand what's going on. It's not just two dudes, wrestling around with each other. There's like a technique to it. So yeah, man. It's again, it's called mixed martial arts for a reason.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not as big into the UFC and everything like that. I'm slowly starting to get into it, but it's just like I don't understand it that much. I do enjoy watching Sugar Sean go out there. That's probably my favorite just because everyone talks about him so much. So I was like, okay, I'll check it out. And I checked out his last fight. And like, even just from not knowing that much, it was actually an interesting fight. And like, I thought it was a great fight. Obviously the result on my end, I didn't like the result, but it happened and
Right.
everything like that. So you had mentioned you're into jiu-jitsu. How did you get into that?
So I wrestled in high school, a little bit in college, and then I started training jiu-jitsu at like 14 years old, but went back and forth, like, went to college, fucked around a little bit, life gets ahead of you. And it's funny, like life gets ahead of you, and then you take a step back, you're like, why am I rolling around with a bunch of sweaty men every day? Like, what am I doing with myself? It's like it makes zero sense in today's society. Like it's 2024. We don't have to be doing this anymore. But at the same time, when you are training, you get involved, like, oh, I'm scared shitless, right? Like, if God forbid I had a fight on the street and it was with this dude that just kicked my ass, I'm dead. You know what I mean? So that inspires you to keep moving, and it's a lot of fun to learn and get better at something. And it's one of those things where, like, you will get better just by doing it. Just get on a mat. I don't care how much you suck. I don't care how bad that day is. You will continue to get better if you just stay consistent. And I would say, when I was hanging out with Dyllon Danis a lot, when he was training for his fight with Logan Paul, we're like neighbors. So he would push me to train a ton because he obviously comes from a grappling background. And we trained at the same spot. So he brought me to a couple different gyms that I sort of fell in love with. And I just love being around those sort of guys. And then he had to stop training to focus on boxing. And I stayed there and we kind of just kept connected. And then, yeah, I didn't want to stop, just because he had his thing going on, and life gets ahead of you. It's one of those things you become that thing. If you start walking around and I got these ears on me and people are like, oh, he trains and he's a grappler and he has a personality online, and you're known for that, well, then you want to be able to match that, right? So you kind of have to keep up with yourself a little bit, and you wrote your name down as I am this. And so you want to become that.
Yeah, man, it's cool to see. Just even like I see some MMA guys getting into boxing. I also see boxing guys coming over to MMA, and just the whole. I just like that MMA has kind of everything. I don't know if that like it's just kind of like a mix of everything. I think it's called mixed martial arts,
Yeah.
and I just love that. So, would you ever like entertain maybe doing an MMA fight, or is that like something that's in the back of your mind or anything? Or
Yeah, I mean, I've sparred before. I've thought about fighting. I've grappled in tournaments before. It's a different level, man. Like fighting somebody and get your face beat in. Like for me, I would. That's not something you play around with, right? Like you don't half train for a fight. You'd have to be all in. And again, there's an opportunity cost to everything. So if now I'm training and I have a camp, something else is going to be put by the wayside, and that something else is probably going to be the brand and business. And I'm like, okay, why am I doing it? You know what I mean? Why am I fighting an amateur fight for no payout and for no real benefit just to say I did it? Would I do like a celebrity fight or whatever it is? Yeah, sure. Of course, that'd be a lot of fun to train for. But for me, I love training. I love getting better. I don't really see a need or a reason to get my face beat in, for an amateur fight.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a hard business to train for and kind of keep consistent. I mean, my friend, I think he's a semi-pro at boxing and everything, and I went through one workout with him, and I'm like, wow, yeah, this is definitely not something for me. I play baseball right now, so I like training for baseball instead of training for that. It's just so much more training than I actually thought. Like, obviously, like you see, like it seems so easy just watching on TV. Like there's a lot of people that be like, oh, I could do that, blah, blah, blah. You really can't. Like you have to train months on months to just be able to be in that form to perform and get the win and everything. And it's just so underestimated from like the normal people's eye of just seeing it. And it's definitely something that is just not built for me. I could never train like that just because I mean I went in one, like it was just me and a friend messing around, like we did like a semi-organized boxing match, and that just we only did 4 rounds, and that's the most like gassed I've ever been in my life. And that's just something that's not for me.
You feel defenseless, man, and you realize that like there is a different level. I always said like I don't care who I go against. I want to be able to give you a good round. Like that's it. If I can give you a good round wrestling and jiu-jitsu, then I feel accomplished. But I realize that I'm not doing this professionally when I would have a really, really hard day and I would talk to the guys that are doing it professionally, and that was their first session of the day, or it was their third session of the day. Like they're not just training and going home. They're training, they're eating, and they're going right back at it. That's all they do all day, every day. So you're not only training for months, you're training sessions 2 or 3 times a day. It's nuts, it's ridiculous. So when I realized that, like I'm not willing to put that effort into it, it's an acceptance, and it's not like I'm not as good as them. It's my priorities are different, right? Their priorities are to become professional fighters, and that's how their life aligns, and my life aligns a little bit differently.
yeah, man, it's always tough to kind of put it in perspective, like what you. I don't even know how to put this, but to show like what, like I know you have your brand, to have your brand, and then also want to fight, but then also kind of, or not fight, but you know what I mean, train mixed martial arts and maybe even do a fight, and kind of put the brand that you work so hard towards behind to do this fight, and then what happens after the fight, if you
Right.
win, lose, it doesn't, it's I think it's definitely high risk, and people might not think about that because it's like, oh, he's getting his name out there, he's doing mixed martial arts, he's getting his name out there. But when you don't, you take away your what's it called, your I don't even know the word for it, but like you take away your vision for this brand for 1 second, you never know what could happen. So I always tell people, just follow and do what you love, and just kind of try to understand what you want to do.
Dude, you got to become obsessed. Like with whatever you're doing, if it's building a brand online or you're trying to train for something, that has to be all you think about. And as soon as you take your eye off the ball, you're missing out on opportunities and you're slipping up. Like I noticed it too. Like when I was training super serious for a pretty big tournament in jiu-jitsu, I was training every day, I was hyper focused on it, but it wasn't just the time I was spending on the mat. It was the mental time I was spending. Like when I wasn't training, I was watching people grapple. And when I wasn't watching people grapple, I was thinking about it. And what I wasn't thinking about was making content and growing the Johnny Drinks brand and doing these things that I know I need to be doing to progress it as a business. And you don't realize it until you look back. You're like, wow, I went 6 months and focused on something else. What was the reward? What was the outcome? Was it worth it? Sometimes yeah, but sometimes no. And the last thing I ever want to do, especially right now, is take my eye off the ball again.
Yeah, I think you've done a really good job, man. Like I've seen you everywhere. I think it's awesome. I love you and your dad's videos and stuff. It's really cool. It's cool to just see that kind of like bind together and you guys can just make videos kind of whenever you want. I think that's pretty cool. But I also had a question. If you had it, I don't know if you have one or if you had one, an inspiration, who would it be or who was it or who is it?
Dude, it's so funny. Like when I was your age, or like even like young, like 20 to like 24, your perspective on influences are different, right? Like they're almost unattainable. Like they're not even human, right? You think of these people and you probably have a list of them right now and you're like, man, I see him as like this god of a person, right? I can never get there and everything they do, I will do to a T because everything they do is right. And then you get older, you're like, well, that's not true. Or maybe you meet them and you're like, oh, well, he's still a human. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't necessarily say that I look up to anybody at this point in my life, but there's definitely people that I pull inspiration from. And it's people that are just able to have extreme discipline and shut out the nonsense of life, right? Like it's very difficult nowadays to progress because there's so many distractions. Just having the discipline to say no to like, I'm not going to check my phone right now. I'm going to work out really hard. Or I'm not going to go out and party with everybody else because I have to do something that's going to benefit me in the long run. Like this short term gratification is definitely something I struggle with. So I'm inspired by people that don't or have the discipline to say no to those things. So it could be business, right? It can be the Dana Whites of the world, or it could be like the typical Jocko Willings or the David Goggins, like every other man that I do think should be following along with these principles. I think they have a bad rep sometimes, but their message is appropriate, right? Like this whole generation of like toxic masculinity, but like what does that really mean, right? Like why is it now toxic to be masculine? And yeah, like there is such thing as toxic masculinity, but for me it's like what does that really look like, being a man and owning up to what that is. And I think it's just like taking accountability for who you are and being assertive and being confident, saying no to things you don't necessarily want to do and living your true self. Like these are all things that we have been told are good and then now recently are told not to do. We have to be a little more sensitive and caring, and all those things are great, but there are people in this world that are kind of showing you the way. And at the end of the day, if you want what they have, start doing more of what they do.
Yeah, I mean, it's always good to have someone to look up to as well, but then it's also like you're not them. Like I think about it, like I see all these people out there. I have like people I look up to and like people I see doing things that I would love to do, but at the same time, no one's gonna take the same route to it. Like we all have different content, we all do different things. It's how you can take what they do and make it more unique to yourself. Kind of like with this
Yeah.
podcast. Like I see a lot of people, they have podcasts like you had mentioned earlier, and it's just like, yeah, like we're taking an approach to it similar to other people just because it's kind of how it is, but we're spinning it to make it unique to us and how making us like stay true to ourselves and just it's just how it works out. But yeah, now go ahead.
No, yeah, it's just you got to find what works for you. Like if you're obsessive over pulling inspiration from, let's say, whoever, so and so, and their morning routine is an hour long, and then you start doing this morning routine, and you're like, why am I doing this? Right? It doesn't make me feel better. This doesn't make me feel more productive. I'm not, I could wake up and just get after it, right? So why do I have to waste the time doing all of these different things that other people are doing that work for them? I think there's definitely takeaways that you could pull and pull inspiration from. But if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. You got to find what's best. And I think that's the hardest part of being in your young 20s or even your 20s in general. Like we're at this age where we're so malleable and everything looks great and everything's the shiny thing in the sky and you want to pull from it and then you get distracted and no, I want to be like that guy. And you're so confused because you don't know who you are. You don't know what works for you. And it's hard because you have people telling you the polar opposite. Like, hey, you may think that works for you, but it doesn't. And now you got to listen to like the voice inside your head or whatever belief you have, whether it's God or not. Um, this is what aligns with me, and I don't really care what anybody else says.
I agree with you, man. We're always thinking about the next step. We're always thinking about how can we make this our own thing.
Yeah.
Like we're starting IRL content soon, just doing like normal little vlogs. And I kind of take inspiration. I'll watch a video. I watch a couple influencers like Nick Naracina, and obviously I watch the Nelk Boys. I watch a bunch of people, and I take inspiration from it, like what I want to do, but I also want to spin it on its head and kind of do our own thing. And I think in the end, that's all you can do, really. I like that. I feel like what you did with your brand is kind of doing your own thing. So I know that you know all about that. I haven't really seen anyone else do what you're doing, which is really cool. I just think that's awesome, man.
Thank you, dude. And it's like you said, you watch guys like Nick, and he does a great job with the vlog stuff, and he's an awesome guy. Um, if you're not him, then you can't make content like him. You know what I mean? Like, I think you come to that realization very quickly. Like, let's say you wanted to be the guy. I don't know. I see a lot of people online that do the like the picking up girls online, right? Like that trend seems to work really really well because it's intriguing. Everybody wants to watch it. But if you go to make that content and it just doesn't resonate with you, then like that's not the type of creator you are. If you're not going to be this outgoing idiot that a lot of these vloggers are, if that just doesn't align with who you are, number one, that's not a bad thing. But number two, like then that's not what you do for content. You can pull inspiration from how they intro the video or how they end the video or what their call to actions are to buy certain things, whatever that may be. Those are cool to pull inspiration from. But to try to write down, like, let's copy and paste exactly what so and so did, it'll never work. I tell people all the time, like, here's how I make my videos. It's very simple. Go and do it. I could give you the formula. You can't go and do it because that's just not who you are. And if it is, do it and put your own spin on it.
Yeah, going along the lines of that, you kind of just gave a little piece of advice for people, but what other advice would you give to content creators coming up like us or like new people coming into the content space? I know you've been here for a couple of years now and probably have learned a thing or two. So I was just wondering if you would give everyone a piece of advice.
Yeah. Um, man, I can go. I could write a book about this. Maybe not, but I
Yeah,
could talk.
man, it's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot, man. So biggest piece of advice I would give, as corny as it sounds, like just start. You know, like they always say, what was like the saying? It's like the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is tomorrow. I don't care what the fuck you do. I don't care if you're filming and you're terrible and the audio sucks and the angles are bad. You have no flow. Just post something. Get that out of the way because your first video is always going to be the hardest to post. And then just get on a schedule that works for you. If I could tell you the best strategy, it'd be to post literally as much as humanly possible. If that's 10 times a day for you and you can keep up with that, then go and do that. If it's one time a day, if it's 4 times a week, I don't really care what it is in the beginning, but get on a schedule and don't overwhelm yourself, right? Like don't tell yourself you're going to post 10 times a day and now you can't even get one out a day, right? Like have a reasonable goal and then achieve that goal and then progress, right? So you got one in a week, that was great. Next week you're going to do two and then three and four and so on. But you have to just post and you have to make content. You don't learn by sitting on the sidelines and watching people. You learn by making content. You know, it's not like this whole there's really no secret to it, right? Like I don't know what your niche is because you're not doing anything. You know, like how could I tell you what you'd be good at until you go and do whatever it is you think you want to be doing. So my best piece of advice would be post a tremendous amount and then look back on your month and say, okay, this style of content did a lot better than the others. And that could be one got 1,000 views and the other one's got 100 views. I don't care what the number is, but find that outlier and now do that over and over and over again. I don't care if it's what you like to do. Everybody's always like, I want to find my passion for making content and okay, if people don't fucking care, then make content for yourself, right? If that's what your goal is, I don't care. In the beginning, I didn't necessarily love making drinks with my dad. Like it was just something we knew we had to do. And we did it. You know, there's plenty of days where we're like, we don't want to film right now, but it is what it is. It becomes a business and you get, you know, tied down to your routine and discipline. You're like, I'm just gonna go and do this now without thinking twice about it. You take a shower every day, not because you necessarily want to, but it's because you have to, right? Make it part of your routine. And so after that, everything else kind of falls into place, right? Like finding your niche and how to make money and who you want to collaborate with. But it comes with just making content, you know. Nothing else will happen if you're not consistent with making content.
Yeah, man. I remember when we were first starting, this was about a year ago, probably 14, 15 months ago. Before all this, we had these ideas and we just were never putting it together. We were like, yeah, we want to post this time. Well, actually, I think 2 years ago, around this time, we wanted to post and it never came out. And we filmed one without. And I don't want to say I'm a perfectionist when it comes to this, but I'm very like, I want things to look right. And we were
Yeah.
trying to film with just like a laptop mic or something. And I just like, man, I do not like how this is coming out. So I was just putting it behind, procrastinating about it. And then finally I was on vacation And I was like, yo, I called him up. I said, yo, let's order these mics. Let's get it done. Like, I don't care how it looks anymore. We're just gonna do it. We ordered some mics. We ordered some XLR cables. Ended up not working in the beginning, and then I got frustrated, and then I ended up figuring it out, and we bought like a I don't. It's like a I don't. What is it? It's like an XLR connector thing. You probably use it. It's like a pod track almost.
Yep.
Yeah, and so we bought one of them and put our first episode out, and everybody was loving it. People were texting me, "Yo, this was awesome! Like, can't wait to." People were like, "Yo, let me on, hop on." I'm like, "All right, man. Like, we got so much to do." And so then we took a little break, came back, and now we're killing it. And I'm so excited to have you on, man. My last question for you. I have one more question, and I know you got an event tonight. What would your younger self like if they could see how far you've come? What would your younger self say? I know it's kind of a sentimental question, but what would your younger self say?
It's a really good question, man. It's such a good question that like it's so hard
Hmm.
to answer. And I think, and I'm giving this advice to you guys and advice to myself, like write that down now, right? Like talk to yourself in 10 years. Like, hey, myself for you guys at 30, for me almost at fucking 40, which is disgusting to say. Me at 40, if you were doing these things, here's how you feel at 29, or here's how you feel at 20. I think if I were to reflect on who I was at 20 years old, I'd be really, really excited. I wouldn't believe what I was doing at 29. You know what I mean? Think, or I know when I was 20, I dealt with a ton of imposter syndrome. Like when I was running my tech startup, at the end of the day, the voice in my head would always say, you're not good enough or you don't know enough. And the people in the room are always smarter and everybody's always testing you. You should go and try to do something different that's not as egregious, right? And looking at it now, I still deal with the same voice. The voice is still there. He's just silenced, and I shut him up a lot quicker. You know what I mean? And the way you shut those voices up is you get way more confident. But the way you get confident is by doing over and over and over again until you become so obsessed that nobody can tell you anything. You know what I mean? Like there's nobody that knows more than me in a specific place. And if there is, I'm so happy to learn, right? Like you become so like excited if you meet somebody that knows more than you do because now it's an opportunity to learn, right? You read more books or you listen to these people not from a place of embarrassment and like insecurity. It's more of a place of I know my own shit. I'm very happy with where I am, but I know there's so much more out there. So my 20-year-old self, again, it's like it'd be hard for me to believe. I probably told myself I'd be doing these things, but I necessarily wouldn't believe myself, and that happens over time. It's not like it's a 0 to 100 thing. It's progressive. You get one win and you say to yourself, maybe I can do this. And then you catch a loss and you're like, ah, never mind. And then you get another win. You're like, oh, wait, yeah, I can. And then the loss doesn't hurt as bad. And then the win feels just as good. And the loss doesn't hurt as bad. And it's this progressive game of managing expectations and not letting your highs get too high and your lows get too low. And then you just have conviction in yourself and what you want to do. So for me, yeah, I would hope that my 20-year-old self would really be happy with what we're doing. And I probably should think about that a lot more when I am feeling like I'm not doing enough and I'm bored with this, or who am I to think that I can be doing this and then some.
Yeah, I'm always with just kind of along the lines of that. I agree with everything you said. Sometimes I'll think back to when I was younger. I used to have this little YouTube channel I ran. I talked about it on the other pod, but some people might remember. Um, I had this little YouTube channel I run with my two buddies, and we ended up just growing out of it. We're like, nah, we're done. We used to just make stupid little like trampoline, like stupid little videos, and we ended up growing out of it. I went to high school, and I just thought everyone would think I'm dumb, and I kind of let the thoughts of others just kind of take over who I am. And then I finally, once I was a senior in high school, that's when I was like, no, I'm done. And other people like kind of tell me what to do. And I'm like, this is it. I'm going to start this. And then along the lines of like, I should be more appreciative. Yes, I probably should be more appreciative of my younger self, but then also the now because I'm only 20. And sometimes I'm like, man, this isn't working out right now. Like, this isn't going as best I could or as best I would want it to. And I'm like, man, I'm 20 years old. I see some people just getting into this when they're in their 30s, 40s. This could take a while. And I just have to be content with that. And I know you probably know better than us. It's definitely, you just have to be content at the start and just keep going.
Bro, you guys could fuck up for 9 more years and
Hmm.
then be my age. You know what I mean? Like you have so much life ahead of you. I saw a dumb tick. My buddies. So my buddy, I don't have too many like creator friends. A lot of my friends work, sales and 9 to 5 jobs, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. I would never say that. and he sent me like a stupid TikTok today. It was a guy that was on a commuter train. It was like POV, you're commuting to work at 6 a.m. because you didn't want to dance on TikTok in 2020, right? Like, and those jokes are great because that's literally exactly what the reality is, right? Like, you didn't want to take the leap. You were too embarrassed to do what you thought was funny, but you didn't want to get made fun of. And now look at these kids that are making fucking millions of dollars making content online because they stayed consistent, they knew who they were, and they didn't really care about what other people thought of them. You know what I mean? I got plenty of friends right now that I'm like, dude, take a fucking year. Like, take a year to be consistent with content. I'll help you do it, right? You have a personality and you have what it takes. You'd be so happy with yourself if you just started. At the end of the day, you can lead a horse to water. You can't make them drink if they're happy with what they're doing. You know, kudos to them. But if you do want to take that leap, fucking take the leap. Doesn't mean you have to quit your job and completely change your life, but try something. You know, who cares? And it's a good learning exercise. Like, go put yourself out there to get embarrassed and realize, oh, wait, that was the worst that happened. Somebody made fun of me. I'm sure there's plenty of people that talk shit behind my back, and it doesn't really bother me anymore. You know what I mean? It never really had, and I don't know. I don't really think about it much.
I agree with you, man. But that's about all we have. That's about all the questions we have. Do you have any for us at all, or?
No, I mean, listen, I think it's awesome that you guys are doing this. Like, keep consistent, let people know more about you guys. You know, I think it's like, why not just be two good friends having a great conversation? I'm sure you guys have great conversation off camera. You got to think about people aren't as fortunate as you guys to have really good friends. So you are their best friends online, you know. So if you're sitting down having a cool conversation, maybe a third buddy that's your silent listener on the other side of the camera, he's benefiting from this conversation. You know, if it's one viewer and you made their day, or they learned something new from you guys, then that's a win. You know, so I would say keep consistent, and hopefully when you're my age, you're gonna look back and say, "Thank God we didn't stop doing this."
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. Thank you for hopping on. And his socials, I think we're gonna have all of them. I know you have your On the Rocks pod, John
Yep.
Rondi, and Johnny Drinks. We'll have all of them above or below. It'll be on there. But thank you, Johnny, man. This has
Always,
been
man.
awesome. I'm super excited that we could make this happen. It's just honestly, it's mind blowing knowing 2 years ago I was watching you in class, and now I'm here talking to you, chatting live, man. It's awesome. So thank you so much, and we really do appreciate you, man.
Anytime, guys. Yeah, feel free to stay in touch. Shoot me a DM if you guys ever have any questions or just want to shoot the shit. But yeah, best of luck with everything, boys.
We
Thank
will,
you.
man. Thank you guys for watching Out of the Park Pod. See you next Friday. If you haven't watched last Friday's episode, go tune in. Thank you guys so much, and we'll see you soon.